I've got a story. Grandparents are from a tiny village in the mountains in Greece. Visit family in summer 2014. Stay in farmhouse with great uncle and cousin. Both super religious Orthodox Christians. Great uncle was a monk for a while. Very knowledgeable about Greek mysticism, Greek legends, and Byzantine mythology. Farmhouse is at the edge of the village. Property is bordered by a very dense forest which is parted by a tiny walking trail that goes to the peak of a small mountain/hill. First night my great uncle, I'll call him John from now on, tells me to never go along that trail alone, but if I have to take a gun and a dog. Every week John will leave food out at the entrance to the trail, if you can even call it that. Basically just an opening where the forest is less dense. You have to cover your skin BC of branches and dense plants scratching you. When asked about it, John refuses to tell me why. WW2 and Greek Civil War veteran who is a tight-ass with food and money. When he fought in Albania he went days without food while under constant harassment from Shitalian soldiers. Makes no sense why he would waste good food. Food is very carefully prepared and is always weird specific meals we normally would have on religious holidays. My cousin who lives with us has to go into the city for a few days to stay with his girlfriend and leaves me and great uncle alone. No phone, no mains electricity, and no contact with the outside world. Nice warm summer, go to this little beach only accessible by walking a few miles down this path from the back of our farm. Get along with great uncle but slowly grow more weirded out by the food offerings, which goes against everything my great uncle would do. As I said, he is like a Brooklyn rabbi when it comes to conserving money and food. One day I get fed up and take some of the food and feed it to our dogs. Great uncle finds out and flips his shiz. Do you know what you have done? Ask him why we can't put more food out. It doesn't work like that. Gives me his shotgun and tells me to keep it with him at all times. He keeps a large hunting knife on him. The sun sets. I see my great uncle looking visibly worried for the first time, well, ever. Normally a stoic stone-faced hard ass, now looking on the brink of tears. Start to feel something is very, very wrong. Great uncle says a prayer in some form of Greek I can't understand. Later I would find out it was a Byzantine prayer for the dead. Great uncle locks every door, shuts every window and tells me to sleep in his room. We take turns staying up and keeping watch. Once again I ask him what the hell is happening and he clams up and tells me to ask him later. On edge because it's dead silent outside. Greek summer means the sky is clear and we hear nothing except the occasional breeze. Silence is absolutely terrifying. We both end up dozing off. Great uncle wakes me up panicked. It is around 1 in the morning. The front door is open. A bunch of stuff has been overturned and some is missing. Dogs are going apeshit and our chickens are missing. Great uncle grabs torch and blade, passes me gun. Says unless we show this thing we mean business, it will continue to mess with us and could hurt our dogs or God forbid us. Still don't know what the hell these things are. Tells me to follow him. My stomach sinks to my feet when I see him heading towards the forbidden trail. The only thing that indicates it's a trail is the foliage is slightly less dense and there is a chiro, religious symbol, cut into a tree to the right of the opening. The trail immediately picks up and we are hiking at an insane gradient. Small animals and insects moving through the bushes keeping our nerves at DEFCON 1 the entire time. Greater than 2 hours of hiking later and we are at a tiny clearing about 2 people wide, isn't even a clearing as the trees still obscure the sky. The dirt is freshly moved. When we disturb the soil it reveals an extremely dirty but clearly mutilated chicken corpse. At this point my great uncle is hysterical and is sweating buckets. I am keeping a thin pretense of composure but my mind is racing and I can barely think. We are at least 2.5 hours away from the nearest other person and probably 4 or 5 hours away from the nearest phone. The nearest doctor is days away. Against all my instincts I start shouting a mix of Greek swear words and taunts at the top of my lungs before firing a shot into the air. My great uncle looks shocked and then glares at me with a mix of pride and anger. Suddenly we hear something moving very far away. It is at least 50 m away, but the sudden silence after my chimp out made any noise seem very loud. It's growing closer. Stops around 10 m away. The noise begins moving away again. Once we can't hear it anymore, my great uncle moves to the general area we heard it. Another goddamn dead chicken. My great uncle turns deathly pale. He turns his head and says, "If it is still leaving out warnings, he is really pissed off at us. Ask him what he means by it. I'll tell you later." Suddenly we hear bushes rustling about 2 meters to our left. Without warning, my great uncle drops onto his belly and yanks me down with him. It is here I get my only glimpse of this thing. I am looking up in the direction of the sound as it grows more distance, and in a gap in some leaves I see the edge of a bone-white face and some black, straw-like hair for around half a second before it is obscured again by the rustling leaves. The head is around 8 feet off the ground near the top of a small tree for this forest. At this point I am questioning my reality and am convinced this is a dream. My great uncle doesn't say anything, but I can tell he saw as well. He silently gestures to get up. We turn around and spend the next 3 hours heading back. Despite being downhill, we come down much slower and much more cautious. Honestly, the longest 3 hours of my life felt like a day. When we get home, the sun is rising and our dogs are cowering in their housing. The back door to our house is now open. It was closed when we left. The realization that there were more than one of these things makes my blood freeze. My great uncle mouths profanities as he enters a small shed. Following close behind, I see the shed, about 2x3 m, is full of sacks of lime and salt. At least 10 bags of salt. My great uncle hands me a bag of lime and tells me to start spreading it around entrances. Ask him what he means by entrances. He is annoyed and says anything that you enter or exit. End up spending over 2 hours spreading lime at the entrance to our farm, the entrance to the Forbidden Trail, the entrance to the beach trail, the doors to our house, chicken coops and dog kennels. My great uncle is content with this. While I was spreading lime, he placed salt at various spots around our farm. We head into town and purchase food and ammo. Ask why we can't just stay with someone else for a few days. Great uncle tells me the things will view it as a sign of surrender and will kill the dogs before trashing our farm, and if we re-enter they will kill us on sight. At this point I am livid and grill my great uncle. He sits down and explains the nature of these things. Known to locals as Babouloi. Take a humanoid form but are not human in any sense of the word. Are the manifestations of the souls of those who have committed evil, condemned to eternity on earth. They can free themselves by taking the souls of the living, and once they have a certain amount, my great uncle wouldn't say how many, they are free. Hostile to every form of living thing. Essentially the personification of the malignant, negative parts of a person's soul. Repelled by limestone, large fires, and white rabbits. They can't feel or see lime, which makes it the ideal repellent. To placate them you can leave out food or animals for them to eat, and they will repay you by steering clear of you and harassing someone else. If you give them food but suddenly stop, they almost always seek vengeance. They are even more hostile than to people who don't give them food at all, and nearly always either kill or drive off their victims from their farms. Only way to make peace with them is to intimidate them and fortify your dwelling and its surrounds with limestone, but even this can't keep them away, and you will need to barricade all your doors. Limestone to these things is like a dog whistle to a pit bull, and they go insane when they come into contact with it. If you don't fortify your dwelling but cast out limestone, you are a goner. If you somehow survive the night, they will track you down and kill you. Legend has it one man moved from a village in Laconia to Epirus near the Macedonian border, the Greek equivalent of moving from Southern California to Maine, and died during his first week at his new farm. Back to what happened. We stock up on high-energy foods, Greek coffee, and blockade every door and window with the limestone and salt bags we didn't use on our farm perimeter. As the sun sets, we start sculling coffee to prepare for the craziest all-nighter of our lives. Literally as soon as the sun sets, we hear the farm gate slamming and footsteps approaching our first line of limestone. As it hits the limestone we hear an inhuman sound that I can only describe as a mix between a chalkboard being scratched but low and dull and a shitty wooden floorboard creaking. No coffee can wake you up as good as what we just heard. Cock shotgun. Another set of footsteps is coming from the fence. First thing hits the second line of lime and this time it screams in genuine pain. We hear it slowly walk forward a few more steps before turning around. By this point our dogs are going wild. Second being is approaching as the first moves back into the woods. This bastard is way bigger by the sound of his footsteps. I nearly shut my pants as this thing hits the line of lime and lets out the most inhuman sound I have ever experienced. The sound is so unnerving it makes the first thing sound like a lullaby by comparison. I cover my ears as it approaches the second line. Wait for what feels like a year, hear nothing. My great uncle cracks a giant grin. We win. We still take turns as sentry but we are much more relaxed, at least for grown men who have just dealt with literal demons. As soon as the sun rises we take the sacks down from doors and windows and we give our terrified dogs some food before leaving food at the entrance to the forest. Spend a day unwinding at the beach and try to forget about my experience. The next night is uneventful and the following morning the bowl of food, mostly tomatoes, and capsicum in olive oil is missing. Despite this being the most normal thing to happen in the past few days, I decide to cut my stay short and spend the rest of my trip in a nearby town in a shitty motel with broken air conditioning and spiders in every crevice. As I say my goodbyes and prepare to drive out, I notice one thing which chills my blood to this day. The lines of limestone we left last night have no footprints or anything else that indicates something walked through it.